I'm Luke Whyte, a second-generation Jamaican-British property investor here in the UK, and you're listening to Property, Purpose and People, a podcast that is specifically and intentionally created and curated for the Windrush Generation and their descendants. When I was 10, maybe 11, we suddenly had to move home. We had lived there for about 8 or 9 years since I was 2 years old. And tell you the truth, I don't even remember living anywhere else before that. All my earliest childhood memories are from that house that we were now leaving. I remember my next door neighbour, Cyril. He never complained about the ball going over the fence, sometimes multiple times in one day, because not everyone had my techers. I remember my older sister's friend, Gemma, who lived at the bottom of the road. I remember the parks that my dad would take us to all the time, like all the time. After school, weekends, holidays. I joined my first football team in that area. Vectra, we were called. Shout out Vectra. I still remember James, right? James was one of the first players that I played with who I genuinely hated when he wasn't on my team in training. I mean, the dude was that good. I didn't never tell my coach, Steve, that because he would have intentionally put us on different teams. But I happened to tell my dad that once, and he came and picked me up from training one day, and he goes straight up to Steve and goes, Who's James? Who's James? And Steve's like, why? He's like, well, Luke tells me he hates playing against James. What a snitch. The house itself was a 3-bed, 1 toilet, 1 shower, semi-detached property. Is that semi-detached property? The house itself was a 3-bed, 1 toilet, 1 shower, semi-detached property on a quiet street in a quiet area. I remember it had a little utility room filled with coats, shoes, bags and other random stuff. I think our first computer actually was kept in there, although I could be making that up.
Why are you recording my call?
What call? Who's recorded your call?
It says this call will be recorded.
Who said that?
I don't know, some woman.
Oh, some chief. I don't know why she's coming on my phone call for fast.
Fast breed. Yeah, so
This is my mum. Obviously, I had to double check the details. Did we have in the utility room at some point? Did you have a computer in there?
of course.
What do you mean, of course?
Yes, I did.
Was that the first computer you had? Was there?
Yeah, that was the first. Yeah, we had a computer in there, yeah.
What computer was it? Do you know?
What?
What computer was it? What type of computer? Do you remember?
I don't know if it was an Amstrad or one of them long time something.
Okay. What did you do? What did you write on the computer? I remember vaguely you writing either your own or someone else's CV on that computer.
I used to write everything on there.
Like what?
I did CVs, I did minutes for church. I did everything on there. I typed theses for students. I typed everything on there.
Okay, that was it. What else was in there? That utility room was full of stuff, though, wasn't it?
Well, the utility room was where we kept coats and
yeah. It's funny how memories all mash into one. Like years and years, almost a decade of them, can seem to be whittled down into a few specific memories. Like when one of my sisters cut my mum's hair while she was having a snooze on the sofa. I can't remember which sister it was, actually. They either received a beating of their life or they were threatened with a beating of their life. I can't remember which one it was. I remember Friday nights. Friday nights were sacred in my house. We watched video cassettes of Christian children's shows and listened to cassettes of songs about Bible characters as my mum prepared for telling the children's story the next day at church. Songs that I teach my kids to this day. They've stuck with me. Songs like, yes, I am about to sing. Daniel spent the night with lions. He could have ended up a late night snack. Daniel spent the night with lions, but the lions never did attack. Of course, a reference to the biblical narrative of Daniel and his adventures in the lion's den. As a Windrush descendant, I already know you know these stories, so I'm preaching to the choir. The reason I remember this house with such fondness is because this was the last house where both my parents were together consistently as a mostly happily married couple. That's probably why it will forever hold a very, very, very special place in my heart. I have absolutely no doubt that the man I am today was forged and formed in that house under the watchful eyes of two exceptional human beings. And don't worry, I tell them this all the time and I'll say it here again. The reason why I am unstoppable and have basically been all my life is because of the unconditional love and attention my parents gave me in my formative years, and basically every day since then. They have never been shy making me know how loved I am, and I love them right back. I'll do a whole episode on these two G's in the future. Between the ages of 11 to 18, we lived in 5 different properties. One I almost accidentally burnt down. Again, that's for another episode. Plus another 2 I sometimes stayed in my auntie's homes. They were closer to where I went to school, so that helped me out in the exam years. So altogether, about 7 homes in 7 years. Some for a short time, some for a little longer. I can only imagine the stress my mother felt as she searched and searched to find a stable, consistent new home for us that we could settle in. And whilst the situation was far from perfect, as for me, nothing really changed. I went to school. Granted, sometimes I was traveling 90 minutes on public transport, but so what? What helped me was I had some other consistency in my life that didn't change. I went to the same church wherever we lived, that never changed. And my parents loved me, so I was cushy. When I look back now, I think an incidental but awesome thing was the unintentional result of all this moving, this upheaval and this uncertainty. There were some positives in it. And let me pause here before I share the positive, because if you don't know me already, I am an eternal optimist. So when I share my take on this situation, it's coming from someone who thinks Manchester United are 1 game away from the glory days. Okay? So bear that in mind. My take is always going to be heavily glass full. All right, we continue. The great things about the adventures of my moving years was this. Are you ready? Because of the uncertainty, because of the moving around, I never had time to join a community of youngsters in any particular area. And I lived from East Ham to Tottenham, West Hampstead to Blackheath. There is no postcode I was in long enough to rep for. In addition, and this is a major key, I never had the time or the audacity to tie my value or my self-worth or my importance to the house or flat I happened to be living in at that time. How many bedrooms it had, was it terraced, detached, was it built, when, where, blah, 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 blah. I never had the audacity to tie my value, my self-worth or my importance to where I lived or happened to be living at that time. This is a big deal, and as I reflect on this, it strikes me quite profoundly that the reason why so many of us make some inexplicably horrendous decisions around all aspects of property and finance is because we have our identity tied to it. Like who we think we are and how we feel about ourselves is often overly tied to the type of property we live in, the area in which that property resides, and the contents that we place within that property. Even more ridiculously, and even more terrifyingly, is for many of us, we have tied our identity, who we are, and what we think of ourselves, not even to the things we have, but to what other people think about the things we have. So, in other words, what do other people say about the property we live in? What do other people think about the area in which our property resides? What do other people think about the contents that we place within our property? Do you understand how wild that is? Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth? Do you speak in English? Shout out to Rush Hour. This is wild, 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 wild. Let's look at the first 2 episodes of this podcast so far. Let's really deep it. Episode 1, ownership. Despite the fact that it may not make sense to you to own, and it makes more sense for you to rent depending on your situation, you will break your back, break up your back to make those payments so you can tell people who don't matter that you own your home. Why? Because what other people say and think about renters. Let's look at the narratives. Some people think renters are non-committal. They're obviously making small money. They can't be disciplined enough to save. Versus an owner who is seen as more serious about life, reliable, dependable. This is not true. This is just some of the myths that we've heard and why we make bad decisions in this area. This unsaid and sometimes said narratives are what drives us. We don't want to be identified as a broke, nomadic dreamer. We want to be identified as an owner, a boss, a proper adult. So regardless of what we truly know about ourselves, we are worried about what others will assume about us. Same with debt, be it the large juicy mortgage or a light 20k Rollie bought on credit, or even the BM we can't afford that we take on finance. We make these decisions not from a place of logic or rationale, but from a deeply insecure place, a place that says you are worthless unless you have these things. Regardless of how you get it, and only once you have it will others see you as worthy. And then only when they see you as worthy will you feel validated and worthy. Wild, 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 wild. For the most part, our grandparents' rationale was slightly different. But nevertheless, I believe it is their experience that has shaped some of the mindset of us, their descendants today. As I mentioned before, they bought houses because it allowed them to provide a level of security for their growing family, especially for the first wave of Windrushers. It is well documented that they couldn't rely on English landlords, largely due to racism, to give them a fair shake. So purchasing as soon as was possible was a powerful and important play to take the leverage of our lives and destinies back. And don't get me wrong, just like now in this climate, it was a great achievement, a milestone. It demonstrated to the wider Windrush community what was possible. These homes became hubs, community bases for our community. So the late great Windrush descendant Benjamin Zephaniah waxes lyrical about one of his homes. He talks poetically, literally, about the soirees that used to take place in his home in Birmingham. He talks about the music, the dance, the stories, the faces. Some of these homes also birthed communities which later became well-established churches. The church I would later grow up in, the church that has remained constant in my life in some way, shape or form for the last 37 years, started in a home in northwest London, Harlesden to be exact, Tubbs Road. Equally as important, these homes became something extraordinary for the preceding Windrush waves. Now listen to this. With each home that was owned by one of us was now an opportunity to provide a safe landing place for other relatives and friends to start their journey here in the UK. We now could intentionally send for our siblings, our nieces, our nephews, our cousins, and allow them to build from a more solid foundation than we had originally. Boom! Level 10 unlocked. If these walls could talk, there are so many tales they would tell. So these are the properties I'm talking about. These are the homes that are now on the verge of being lost by our community. These are the homes that we should protect. These are the homes that need to stay in our community. Whilst their function may be different now, their impact is not. They still have the potential to provide a continuous and reliable source of income for generations to come. Now, that may not be for your particular family. Maybe selling may make more sense for your situation, but it can provide the security that is necessary for another family from our community. If you're going to sell to someone in our community. If you're going to keep the property but don't want to self-manage it, give it to an established company owned and operated by someone in our community. If you're going to live in it, for Windrush's sake, take care of it. Take care of it. Take good care of it. I can manage any building, commercial, residential, of all shapes and sizes, in any part of the world for anyone, and I have. But when dealing with my community, I have an extra pip in my step, extra vim in my chest, and so much mustard in my hamburger. When I'm dealing with mold, getting a boiler fixed, or dealing with a leak at a property owned by someone in our community, when my company pays out tens of thousands of pounds each and every month in guaranteed rent to Caribbean landlords, I don't know if anyone is as happy as me when money leaves their business for that reason. I feel an immense sense of pride to be able to do this for my community. I have a strong sense of fulfillment. I relish in the responsibility. It doesn't weigh on me heavy. It weighs light because I truly understand what I'm doing. I am integral and essential in continuing to ensure my community continues to progress. This is why I'm so resolute on this. I am dedicated to empowering the Windrush generation and their descendants to expertly manage their properties, the ones they own, the ones they rent, so they can maximize the income they produce, secure generational wealth, and ultimately leave a lasting legacy. This is my purpose. This is my contribution to the community that has given me so much, and I am proud, proper proud, to be a part of. Guys, thank you so much for listening to the episode so far. It's me, Luke, obviously. Just a quick one to say this episode is sponsored by me. So listen, if you want any help with your property, if you want any advice, shoot me an email, luke@lukewhyte.com. That's LUKE at LUKEWHYTE.com. We can get it cracking. And that's about it, really. On with the show. Peace. Okay, so people, you know I like to go even deeper and get a bit spiritual. So that's where we're heading now, right? If this is where you depart, then please mind the gap between the train and the platform. I'll see you next week where we discuss... Come on, you fall for that every week. Tune in next Wednesday for another spectacular episode. Whoosh. All right, so today we're sticking with the biblical narrative and really the Judeo-Christian worldview, because let's be honest, it's within this worldview that I am well versed and I like to talk about what I know. So when we consider place, buildings, identity, belonging, the themes we have discussed in this episode so far, the Bible has a lot to say. I mean, a lot. I'd go as far as to say the idea of identity, if not the main theme of the Bible, is on the Mount Rushmore of biblical themes. Throughout Scripture, the divine is revealing to us who we are and who God is. When I read the Scripture, that's what I see. I see God and I see humanity, how we have interacted with each other in the past, and in fact, glimpses of how we will interact with each other in the future. So, identity. Put simply, the Bible tells us that we are royalty. In the British context, this is loaded. The idea of royalty is familiar to us. We have observed royalty over the years, and we have seen or heard of the good, the bad, and the ugly therein. The biblical narrative implores us to acknowledge our own royal status. It tells us that God is the king and we are heirs to the throne. This is really just the tip of the iceberg. Look, if we go back, we go back to Genesis. We don't even have to leave Genesis, to be honest with you. The way in which the scripture talks about the way humans were created, I mean, look at it. A divine being crouching down into the dirt. Well, it wasn't dirt yet because no one had walked on it. So earth. Okay, earth, that's right. Earth is a better word. A divine being crouching down into the earth picks the soils up rolls it between his fingers, starts to fashion and shape humans with his very own divine hands. I mean, that word picture alone fries my brain. Like a master potter, an analogy that the Bible also uses in reference to us and God. Like a master potter, he molds and shapes and bends and folds and creates in his image. Again, don't miss that. Another marker of our identity. We are made in the image of God. Again, this is just the tip of the iceberg. So let's look at it. So we have that humanity is handcrafted by a divine being. That alone is humbling, right? Second, we were made in the image of God. Like, what does that even mean? I don't know exactly. There's many, many, many books being written on it, but I know it's freaking awesome. And we are royalty, part of a divine royal family. These are just three small, we ain't gone nowhere, guys. Look, I could go on. But we just take these three little things. Divine, image of God, handcrafted by a divine being. Just take these three small little nuggets about yourself and run with it. Because let me tell you this, I take these claims extremely seriously and I believe them. I believe them about you, but I believe them about you because I first and foremost and most importantly believe them about me. The power in believing in such a narrative speaks to what I alluded to earlier. Where you find your identity can either free you or keep you in bondage. There's always a faster car, there's always a bigger house, there's always a nicer watch, there's always softer fur, there's always shinier shoes, there's always other awards. And let me tell you this, because you might not even realize this. Even if you had it all, the best of the best, the latest and the freshest, I believe that that's when you'd find yourself in real trouble, because you'd have to face the fact that although your sense of worth and identity was based in these things that you now have, you will find that it's fully superficial. You would find that it's fully surface level, and you would find that you would feel still unfulfilled. Toys and gadgets, money and things hit different when your identity is not tied to them. You can enjoy them, you can share them, you can even lose them and lose not an iota of your self-worth and sense of priceless value. This, my friends, is the power. This is where I want you to find your power. This is where I want you to find your worth and your identity. Not in these possessions, not in these things, but in what the divine has said about you. Hello?
Why are you recording our call?
I'm not.
I said this call will be recorded.
Who said that? Listen, was it you or who was?
Why are you recording the call?
Just listen. Don't worry. It's for the people them. Listen, was it you or was it cut mum's hair or your own hair? Was it your own
I
hair?
cut mum's hair and I got lashed for it. Because one of you lot told me to do it.
Why? Who told you?
It was either you or told me to do it.
Oh my god.
And when I did it, she laughed at me.
No, she didn't.
What? She put down a piece of laughing on my car.
That's not true. You're...
Thank you for listening to another episode of Property, Purpose and People. Did you know you can watch the podcast on YouTube? If you prefer to see that kind of thing, then search for Property, Purpose and People on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to share with a friend. And if you are really from the Windrush Generation or one of the descendants, make sure you rate and review this podcast. And I will see you on the next episode. Peace!